G'day team, Lucas here again from Crofty. I've got the amazing Jock Fairweather with me today. Welcome aboard, bro. Thanks for being on
Thank
here
you.
today.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Before we kick off with intros, I want to quickly, introduce the world to who you were when I first met you, which was back in Little Tokyo 2 days. You just come back from overseas. The shoe brand, if I remember correctly, or in that space. So quickly introduce yourself, who you are, where you've come from, and then we'll dive into the topic today, which is all things VC and raising capital for startups.
Sure, thanks. I've been doing entrepreneurial stuff for 18 years, a variety. I had a luxury women's shoe label that I majority exited in the UK. I then started and famously destroyed the biggest incubator in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm sure you can Google it. I then worked for a media company that got acquired. Then I worked for a startup investment community software that got acquired. I've also worked for various funds and family offices doing deal scouting and venture analyst type work. And it sort of all leads me to today, which is we run Community VC, which is basically a directory and forums for APAC startups trying to find their first strategic and aligned investors and supporters for their first sort of serious round. And off the back of that, we run an Iceberg Skool community, which is all about investor nurturing and comms best practices. And we're doing that as a wraparound support community for an all integrated comms and systems CRM for founders to maximize their network ROI.
Absolutely love it, and I love the fact that you've been in the space. You understand the pain from an entrepreneurial journey, and what I think draws me to what you're doing these days, Jock, essentially is when we went through our startup journey and raising capital from Australia/US investors. You feel like you're on your own because when we were doing it, we felt like we were on our own. There was no community. There was no we had to make our own community. It wasn't until we actually raised capital from a VC in the US that we were then a part of a community. But until you raise that capital, apart from Facebook groups and meetups and like entrepreneurial groups that we used to be part of, you've got to do a lot of door knocking to be able to figure out who those people are. So I think I love that about what you're doing today. Let's double click on that and dive into what does this community look like? How do you become a part of the community? What are the benefits of being part of the community? Just give us a insight for the entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, for sure. So the first place most people start is with Community VC. It'll be called Iceberg sooner or later for discovery purposes, but basically founders and investors and supporters can create profiles that are discoverable. They can also create company profiles, and there's interesting features like when you're raising capital, you can click a button, it'll create a banner on your profile, alert the whole network. So there's lots of like interesting little unique parts to it. So we're growing that maybe 50 to 80 people a week, I would say. And then, so you can do that for free. Just go on community-vc.com. And then off the back of that, we've been working with founders for a long time on various formations of raising capital. And I think if you would allow me for contextual reasons, Lucas, I think there are really great communities out there for entrepreneurs, by the way, like Startup Network, StartMate, Taurus, etc. And they're like specialized or great at different things. What we found across the last sort of 2 years, let's call it, working with more than 150 founders to close capital, was that more often than not, founders were skipping the relationship building and the importance of communication and going for sort of like volume. So it could be like the proliferation of accelerators, or I'm not sure, but there's sort of this ingrained way of operating for founders, which seems to be create a deck in a silo and then just spray it at investors, hope for meetings, etc. And in my opinion, I think across my career, I've been part of 600 mil in capital raisings or closed capital, and none of it had anything to do with spraying decks or what the deck was or how good the pitch was, because they feel like these binary instances that have your fate in their hands, which doesn't make much sense to me. And so across all the evolutions we've had of Community VC into what we're building out with Iceberg, it seems that it's all about like communication and the systems of communication. And so we've been working with founders on revamping, obviously not just their monthly investor update, but how they word it, the channels they send it through, the frequency, how they take snippets and reuse them to get engagement, how they bring investors on the strategic journey to build the quarterly updates that flow back into the monthly, and so on and so forth. And so that's the kind of stuff that we've been working on with founders a lot. And in the Skool community, I built about 100 pages worth of modules, for attracting, nurturing, and engaging or activating investors. What we really focus on is the nurturing segment, which is like, how do you build lines, not dots, with investors? How do you build relationships over time? So then when it's time to actually raise capital, in a sense like what we did, you could probably close capital in a week. The premise of that, though, is it could be 6 or 12 months worth of effort and nurturing put up front before closing the capital. Because what we know is, like, basically every investor that I've interviewed over the last year or so has said from first meeting a founder to investing, if it ever comes off, is a year crows fly. So if that's true, how can we put ourselves in the best position to get their capital when the time is right? And that's all of the things that we try to focus on.
Absolutely love that. And I can 100% agree to everything you just said, because that was exactly what I went through when we were raising our capital. And essentially, it's like, I could do thousands of meetings over a 18-month period to be able to close our 1.5 mil pre-seed round. And that those thousands of meetings was essentially the feedback you're getting from investors to then update the pitch deck, to update your data room, to update like all the information, everything that investors are needing and wanting up front. But you don't have the insights of what you're sharing now to prepare the founder to actually be ready to actually raise capital. But you definitely hit the nail on the head, which is founders don't want to do any of that. They just want the cash in the bank. And so it's a two-way sword, right? Which is like, just give me the 500K, just give me the million, just give me the 5 mil, whatever you're chasing. It's like, it just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. That's not how the VC world works.
And I think, interestingly though, and the earlier it is, right? So the VC market, I would suggest, is changing broadly. Like Notion, the company, 5 years ago, it probably needed 10x the capital and 10x the staff to do what it's doing today, for obvious reasons. And I think that that's going to continue, which probably means the middle market VC, or like the easier to get VC money, is going to merge or die. And they either have to go earlier, more broad, more niche, or they have to go later and try and back SpaceX's. But so what that means, right, is unless you're doing SpaceX, you do probably have to build a personal relationship with, I don't know, Chamath or Elon or something. But the earlier it gets, the more personal it gets, right? And so often the angels or the highly strategic people that you want capital from are actually right under your nose. The thing is, you're missing them for two reasons. One is that you've been primed for whatever reason to use, not that it's a problem, but like the Airtree angels list, and you're spraying them. So you're not looking at the people who are close in your network that you've worked with before, that you have some history with. Secondly, the thing you're opening them with is a deck saying, here's the cool shit I'm up to, flick me 500K. And for most people who don't identify as a primarily active investor, you're instantly turning them off. And so there's plenty of ways you can bring people in on a journey in a really structural way, so that they don't feel like you're pitching them asking for money day one. But when it gets to day X and it's time, they're like, oh shit, I'll be in on that too. Why not?
And this is because, well, in my experience, investors want to see that you put the hard work in to prepare yourself. So when you do get the capital, you're not just going to waste it willy-nilly. You've actually done the 1 year or 2 years getting the structure right. And then you've got an actual plan to hit the ground running. Is that what you're still seeing out there now? Is that what investors are still, whether it's pre-seed or seed or family and friends, all the way through to Series A, Series B?
But I don't go later, so won't make any commentary. But certainly when the climate is tighter, the more traction and proof is required. Yeah. There's no question. And
product market fit. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Just the more effort in that realm, and the more you can show how far you can get with less. Secondly, on the comms side that I think is really important. There's investors in groups like Folklore, as an example. Rebecca from Folklore, she's so excellent. The way she describes how she wants to figure out how a founder thinks is really interesting. We've got a part of our module which is basically like a complete flow and reverse engineering of why you're going after what you're going after and what each step means, basically an if this then that. And those kind of comms give investors, say you're lacking on the traction side, that kind of thought process and being able to display that effectively helps them build trust with you and your ability to think and execute really well. I think Andreessen Horowitz, they call it like being a maze runner. But in a sense, there's all of these things that can help you progress trust and rapport with people really easily.
I'll definitely double click on that one because I saw that firsthand in our experience where the quarterly updates we were actually doing monthly updates originally. Those updates actually got me introductions to other investors because we were going through a process of, we're in the tech space, so we automate everything through HubSpot. But once you collect all the information, put into a nice, succinct email out to your investor network, then they would forward it onto their investor network and then just start opening up those doors. But that's because you put the time and effort into this structure. It took me a long time to get that structure right. But even today, surprisingly, they use our Tribute quarterly update as examples for the next generation of founders coming through, which is pretty inspiring, even though we've had to shut Tribute down since then. But it's just like that structure is so prominent, and we got taught that from Jason Calacanis, right? Our main lead investor, Rob Ness, and so they taught us that in the very early stages to get that structure right before just going and willy-nilly spraying spraying all the investors.
Totally, I think that's really interesting. I'd love to see it. We could use it as a prime example because I think a couple of things. One is the reason like we're interested in the evolving nature and AI and being able to personalize at scale is that you, Lucas, and I, like our personas as founders, like could be very different. The way we like thinking and doing can be really different. It's not right or wrong. It's just different, and it's my style and it's your style. And you do want that to come across as well in your communication. So you can have a nice template of whatever, but it's all of the nuances that make it you and your style that can make cut through, because inevitably what we're suggesting is people, at least 1/3 of what they're buying into is you. I think another thing that's just super important to touch on,
before you go on, what you're saying is personalized. Be very personalized and make sure it's you and not just some random generic template out there. Like make it who you are as a person.
Totally. How it's written has to be from you and representative of you and the company. Also, it has to be personalized to the person receiving it. So we've seen already it would be circa 3% response rate on blanket monthly email updates. When you start doing some personalization work, we can see it go up to 50%. And our opinion, our strong opinion on if we just stick to the monthly updates, is that there's many layers to it, but that looks to me, a monthly update looks to me like an opportunity to get shares and forwards and excitement like you're suggesting, but it's also an opportunity to ask for legitimate help, like help, favors, etc. There's actually so much opportunity in that space that's untapped, which is totally wild to me. And that's what, when we talk about like maximizing network ROI, that's like sort of one piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. Also, we got huge introductions because of just putting that extra section in the investor update. Ask, what is your ask this month? What are you trying to achieve this month? And then the investor would reply with, by the way, I know that person in that company. I'll give you an intro. Like, it's an absolute game changer. So yeah, I agree with that. Let's conscious of time, let's double click on the community VC first, and then we'll talk about the school. So from a community VC perspective, you said it's like the really early stages. Let's just dive into who community VC is for, to make sure it's like the ideal fit for both the founder and also you guys.
Yep. So the importance of the focus on a fit for us is really around like the Iceberg and Skool community, but I'll touch base anyway for community VC. For community VC, really, we're actually trying to capture all of APAC startup and early stage business investors, experts, and the startups. Premise being, sorry, my computer's lagging. Am I fine?
Yeah, you're coming through fine, but your video is lagging. There you go. I think you're coming back now.
I'll just shut a couple.
I can still hear you. Yes.
So
or Google Chrome.
Video's better now. Yeah, it is Chrome. Okay. So for community VC, we're basically just going APAC and broad. Reason being, it doesn't exist really. It's very disparate, like the way that the directories and the lists and well, there's no directory, or the lists are all formed online. And we're not monetizing at all. It's literally free to play. And the whole purpose of it is really just creating distribution and connection between the founders, investors, and advisors. So that's all that is. Technically, anyone who enjoys startup or early stage investing or building can be involved, create a private profile or a company profile, start following people, get company updates, notify people when you're doing specific things. So we're actually technically going after everyone in that space. In the Skool community is when we're much more focused. What we've realized basically is if a founder's raised a couple of rounds or they've been through sort of like a high profile accelerator, they already have been taught methods and they're already on a train that they don't really want to change. So if the spray and pray worked and they've already got a huge network that they're killing it with, right now, what we're teaching and what our product will do, at least for the first horizon, isn't going to be able to support them effectively. We hope that it will sooner or later. So right now, really, we look for pre-seed and pre-seed companies, i.e. they want to raise their first sort of like real round from sophisticated investors. Generally haven't completed like a high profile accelerator. If they're in one, it can work out. But if they're in, say, Medtech Actuator or something like that, which is like a pre-accelerator, it's really good. So they're getting taught all sorts of structures outside, but we're focusing on investor comms and nurturing systems. We seem to work super well with health tech, ESG, Deeptech, and ecom/consumer. There's a heap of reasons around that. We will explore working with others, but those in at least the APAC environment seem to work the best for a variety of reasons. Those founders also are more than willing to actually like work in a system. You will know with HubSpot, like there's a lot of people who have HubSpot. There's 1% of them that use it really effectively. Shit in, shit out. You know, you catch the drift.
Doesn't matter what system you use. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what system. So we focus really on those sectors. And the founders that are joining us mostly are looking for their first sort of 30 key supporters, aligned investors/experts that will help them successfully close their first round. We definitely dabble with founders that are beyond 30. They come in with beyond 30. They might not have even raised a round yet. But circa our experience has been 30 will close your first, i.e. a pre-seed, and 100 will close a seed, like guaranteed. So that's basically what we focus on.
Have these founders already done a family first round, family and friends, or they're just like bootstrapping, all of the above?
All of the above. I think we're really focused on, like, when I say real is a bit tongue in cheek, isn't it? But the first 30 sophisticated humans that are willing to put in real time or real money into you sooner or later is what we're focusing on. Because we've just seen across 150 founders, 30 is pre-seed and 100 is seed. That's the numbers. And so we just focus on helping founders effectively attract and then warm them up.
Yeah, cool. And then are you then partnering with all the angel groups? Is that like your first stepping? So you get the founder ready, get them prepped, and then put them in front of the right investors at the right time?
Absolutely not. It's not our job to do any of the connectivity. That's the founder's job. So the module that we cover called Attract, which is like the first third of what we're about, that really doesn't have much to do with our product or philosophy. So we've got things like Boardy on there. We've got things like how you could use LinkedIn Export and Rocket Reach, all these different things to get lists. It's the founder's prerogative to go out and actually create the first connection and then begin the nurturing process. So once someone's sort of like gone, let's say your outreach is, hey, Lucas, love what you do. I'm doing community VC, blah, blah, blah. This is the vision. You look like you've got some really incredible skill sets. I'd love to like keep you in the loop of what I'm up to. Let's just go with that. And I open with that. As soon as someone's like, yeah, cool, no problem. They're in our investor nurturing CRM and we're beginning a nurturing cycle with them. So that's the point that we really focus on from there. It's not our
You're
job.
teaching the founders how to do it, and then it's their job to actually go and do it.
Totally.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, at the end of the day, you got to learn, right? And it's the founder's job to actually raise the capital, not anyone else's job.
Well, you'll know. I mean, an intro is an intro, as in, like, unless I know I'm have deep conviction in whatever your company is, and I'm going to invest. An intro to another investor is kind of worthless. It also puts reputations at risk. It's all sorts of things that go on, and our goal here is not to be accountable for investment and capital raising. What we're doing as founders are paying us to see what the best practice investor nurturing and comms systems are, and they're ever evolving, and there's like an entire moving system behind it.
Yeah, it's absolutely needed and so warranted in this space. So if you are a founder listening in, don't do what I did. Don't do what majority of the founders out there, and just you have to learn from your mistakes and spend 18 months hitting your head against a brick wall. Get all that up front, put it in place, and then you're prepped to succeed. So yeah, absolutely love that. And I guess you guys are still learning every single day. What I'm really keen to talk about is those sectors you talked about, right? So if we're looking at from a ESG or health or deep tech or e-commerce, you didn't use the word AI, which is interesting, right? Because back when we do, it's like, are you an AI company? Are you an AI first company? And then obviously the entire AI boom. My assumption is behind the scenes of all these industries will be a layer of AI, but that's just a given. And is that just like, I'm keen to hear from you. Is that just expected now that there should be AI in your company at some point?
Yeah. I just suppose, I think AI is just treated horizontally for the most part.
Yeah.
And they'll all have it ingrained one or another. So
love it.
So
good.
Our deep hypothesis is off the back of that statement I was suggesting around mid-market VC, the way that it's moving in the personalization, is that we think that the majority of successful companies, like the volume of them, will come from leveraging AI and then leveraging network. And we want to build the ubiquitous system for maximizing network ROI. Like, that is our entire endeavor. So if I dive like into health, ESG, deep, e-com / consumer, the reasons these ones have worked to date is health and ESG. I'm going to bucket them together for ease. Is that people have emotional alignment to those businesses. So if a health company is going for mental health something, ESG is going for saving Great Barrier Reef, it usually means two things. It's really easy to attract people to follow along and want to be like emotionally invested in what you're up to. Tick. Secondly, often these companies want to like trial a lot of things and build advocacy with a community or a community vibe around them. So it fits our premise perfectly. Like, how do you create this supporter network that's not customers? They will be gray, but like a secondary network that you leverage for success. Deeptech's a really interesting one. It's been our most successful forum as part of community VC. And I think what's interesting about Deeptech is, in a nutshell, if you pitch to Main Sequence and whoever else and they say no, you're in pretty big trouble, because there's not much else deep tech funding around, because deep tech requires extreme horizons and a lot of risk. So that another way to like work with that is building long-term, really deep relationships with people. And so that's like our endeavor with Iceberg. And then lastly, e-com and consumer is another, it's a really interesting one. Because, well, most of them, at least the ones we work with, are making some money, so it's not trouble, but they're also looking for ways to leverage their network beyond, let's say, what Klaviyo's offering. So Klaviyo is like leveraging or trying to sort of upsell shit to your network, really. So if there's a Klaviyo for your customers, we're sort of in a lateral sense building Klaviyo for your supporters.
I love that. That makes total sense. I'm just logging onto your Iceberg website. Just want to understand pricing structure, right? Because there's so many founders out there that need this, and I would love to pass this on to them. How do you currently charge? What is the model? Is there any funds available from the government to help kick off these startups? Like, what's your process you go through?
If there's government funds available, we'll take them. But the short answer is actually in circa 2 weeks, our monetization strategies start. So we've been monetizing in a sense for a while, helping like via founders paying to list on the platform and then get coached with their comms and all sorts of stuff. But as we went through this transition where we created this school and we're going live with a school, etc., our decision around pricing has become we're going to charge $98 a month for the school, which is like the support community, all of the modules and all the live things that we run, which are all to do with investor comms systems. And then we're going to actually embed at least version 1 of Iceberg in that pricing. So in the school community, you get all the support, but you also get Iceberg within it. So version 1 of Iceberg, it's circa 3 weeks away, is basically a complete replacement of Airtable and MailChimp. So it's a full customized, very opinionated CMS that has many more tracking and engagement metrics than MailChimp would. Base case. Our next step will be like the first variations of investor personalization on autopilot from starting from your monthly update. But in a nutshell, $98 a month. And we run a whole bunch of live things every week. We actually leverage community VC, of course. We put new active investors and experts in and all their contact details for all the founders every single week so they can keep like re-upping their CRM and keep adding and snowballing contacts there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, nice, love it. One thing that I loved throughout our journey was around the community, and I think you already hit this on the head, is what you learn from going and doing outreach and speaking to investors is one aspect, but actually learning from other founders doing it, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and then sharing. Hey, this don't go talk to this investor because this is the outcome. They're just a waste of time. Well, no, this one really actually means what they're saying, and that's like you got to really understand the investor world, right? The community you're building, it's like, is that what you're trying to get to? Like, is that the outcome you're trying to achieve? Is like just everyone help each other to make the most of the time that you have to raise capital.
Yeah, we actually do a heap and have been doing a heap of, I don't know what you call it, but cross-pollinating databases and info across investors. So the answer is yes, and I think it's super interesting and I think it's super relevant. I think that's part of the power we'd like to build with Iceberg. So if an investor and a founder choose for their information to be public, it means what we'll do is share the different insights and comms between them across the other founders for like a rising tide sort of effort. I think one of the interesting things, and a lot of this is a learning curve. One big risk for us is the habitual learning curve. So proactively nurturing people who aren't customers as part of your, let's say, weekly activities is something we're going to have to get around and are proactively pursuing. I think, yeah, the other one is, I think like a lot of founders, and fair enough too, think if I'm speaking to Lucas, like I want to be the only guy in his line of sight, which is, of course, it's not true. Anyone who's a proactive investor has a whole stack rank and there's all this stuff going on. So you'd be better off sharing the details with Jock and figuring out who in his list might be the perfect fit and vice versa, and helping each other get the money out of the right person instead of pushing shit uphill and like trying to get Lucas money. You're never going to get it.
Yeah, I totally understand and agree with that, because at the end of the day, you can only raise capital from one person from that starting point, or you say your top 30 that come together through a syndicate or whatever it might be. Not everyone is the right fit for everyone, and so yeah, 100% agree on that one. The one of the other points was around, you go through this journey, right? and you're all helping each other to achieve greatness. And some of the comments that I had come across in my time was like, well, no, I don't want to tell you about that person because I want to raise the money from that investor. I don't want them giving their money to that investor, to that founder, and so forth. So, but I think that you've already, answered that question. It's not how it works. Like, so you should help each other to achieve that.
I think like there's two ways. You either like the best performing company of your type, sector, stage, etc. period, and you'll get the money because you're the best performing one with the best outlook, right? And so that puts you in the top whatever percent. For the most of rest of everyone, it's really about the personal relationship and building the lines from the dots with whoever that person is. So over time, showing them how you navigate all the difficult situations, that you continue to execute, that you're getting closer and closer to whatever, wherever you are heading. And like, it's basically your hedge to not being the top 0.001% part of the curve. But that's also the same thing with sort of like removing the fact that VC money is the only money to make it. I think that's becoming actually less and less and less of a thing.
Yeah, that's good. Hopefully the angels can jump on in, or even family, friends, or whatever around it looks like. One last point I'll let you run, man, because I know you've got a super busy day, is what are these stigmas, and hopefully this has changed now, when we started our journey, was around you need to commit full-time to raising capital. It's a full-time job. It's really hard to do anything else. I was running Crofty. I was also running Tribute as a startup before we raised capital and could focus full-time. People had told me it's a full-time job. And I was like, oh, whatever. It's just a few meetings. It'd be totally fine. It was definitely more than a full-time job. It was hard, especially because we were on COVID and everything was on Zoom and everything was at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the US. It was not easy trying to run two companies and also raise capital. Has that changed, or if you are raising capital, you should commit full-time to it?
I suppose the answer is it depends on your approach and how late you've left it. So if you think about, let's say if you put 6 months worth of effort upfront into nurturing for a raise, so 6 sets of 4 weeks, 24 times 3 hours a week is whatever the maths is, 72 is it? Well, anyway, whatever, 72 hours, doesn't matter. The point being is like, you can either do that upfront for a period, or you can do 5 hours a week. It doesn't matter, whatever's relevant. Or you can cram all of that into one period and be like, oh my God, it's a full-time job raising capital. So the way that I would suggest, or I prefer, which makes it much more personal too, is when I first ever came up with the original idea of community VC, which I can't even remember what that was, to be super honest with you. What I did was I reached out to 5 people who I thought were like my dream investors with the skill sets and strategic alignment that could support my vision and mission. So for example, Gordon Tan, a multi-exit CTO, he's got CTO experience. Another guy, Jonathan Louis, he's the founder of Airtasker and now Soho, marketplace expert. I wanted to be a marketplace as an example. And I just reached out to them to begin with, the same way I suggested earlier, like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'd love your help. Over time, can I keep you in the loop? And I just, over time, like with the right frequency and channels and etc., kept updating them, and then kept adding people to that updating sequence, and then kept bringing them closer, i.e. instead of an email blast, it was individual emails to a WhatsApp group to DMs, so on. And when I get closer and closer to the raise, I can't remember how many we had, 35, 40. And on a Monday morning, we floated the idea to raise money, just a small amount to get us through like end of MVP and testing and monetization. And by Friday afternoon, we had money, like case closed, money in the bank, literally. So it was 1 week and, a couple of meetings a day, most asynchronous, just chatting on shit on WhatsApp to close an entire round. But the premise of that is all the work was done up front.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. In a system, on the right cadence, understanding who I was talking to through the right channels, telling about the things they cared about the most, and so on. So the actual capital raising period was so succinct because of that effort.
I love that. I totally wish I knew that up front before we started our journey. That's awesome, man. I can't wait to see how this this launch goes, your next venture with bringing on thousands of founders all around the country, and then no doubt globally. I think it's just an amazing concept of what you've built and what it's going to do for the entire startup community, man. So I take my hat off for you, and congratulations on taking that leap again into this space and doing it once more, because typical serial entrepreneurs, we just can't haven't taken enough of this what do they call it, the startup life.
I know. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me. You're a legend.
No worries, man. And so everyone, please reach out to Jock or one of Jock's minions if he prefers to not talk directly. But please, you talk, sweet as, jump on the both the community VC and also the school. Sign up, become a member. I just think it's a no-brainer. So I'll definitely be referring and recommending founders to jump on board, man. Congratulations once again.
Awesome, dude. Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers, buddy.